Welcome back, I'm Inigo, this is Scrambled Kegs, and this is not Let's Play number 2, where it's not a Let's Play, but I do play a game and I do talk about stuff. And today the game's Fill Up the Hole, and today I'm talking about Stranger Things. Conformity Gate. You've seen the thumbnail, you've seen the title, it's just going insane, and I feel like talking about this because I'm seeing a lot of parallels with some other menace to the world, like society at large, and it's been a cautionary tale for a while now. Everybody's annoyed with it. Nobody's really for it in 2026, and it's the Snyder Cut movement thing, the Snyder Cut thing. And I'm seeing a lot of parallels in how the Conformity Gate people are behaving like the Snyder Cut people, and I'm seeing it going down that road. And so in this video, I'm going to break down the three main things that drive, this kind of behavior with those kinds of people. And yes, I'm going to do a dedicated video on the Snyder Cut thing because, one, I think it's really fascinating in a weird way. So I'm not going to get too deep into that, but in this video I am going to break down at least the three main things that I've identified that drive this kind of behavior in these types of people and these two groups. And obviously they're not going to be one-to-one same, but they are similar enough with a bit of nuance between them where it's good to compare. And yeah, I'm not sure what you're gonna do with this information, but if you find this interesting, I hope you watch to the end of the video, and I hope you take something cool from this. Then after that, I'm gonna talk what's likely gonna happen, like, where this thing is gonna go to, like, will we have an episode 9? Will the Snyder Cut actually come back? That's gonna be interesting. And then at the very end, I'm gonna share what I do think what happened with, the ending of Stranger Things, just so you know where I stand in all of these, and why the hell not, right? So without further ado, one further ado, word from our sponsor. So if you end up enjoying this video, do give it a like, and also check out my other stuff in the channel. Do give me a sub if you're into the stuff I make, and also check out the other, watch the other videos, because liking and subbing, even for me, it doesn't work anymore. You really need to watch a few videos, tell the algorithm, hey, I want to see more from this guy. And pro tip, by the way, that's how you see more of the stuff that you want to actually see on YouTube in this algorithm. So without further ado this time, let's break down Conformity Gate, what's actually going on, and is it going to go the way of the Snyder Cut, or is this the last time we're ever going to hear from it? Alright, as you can see, I'm literally playing this right now. This isn't looped footage from, whenever I play in the downtime. And also, I've taken multiple takes of this thing, of this video, over and over again. So hopefully this is the one. So the three main things that drive this kind of behavior with these kind of people, aka the Snyder Cut people and the Conspiracy Gate people, are the following. Number 1, sunk cost fallacy. Number 2, the availability of extra content, like a lot of content to be consumed, and the fact that the conspiracies in both cases are actually good. Okay, topped off my people over there. Yeah, let's fill up this hole. So all of these three things pretty much feed into each other. They don't really work by themselves or in and of themselves. These three actually have to work hand in hand with each other to really drive this kind of, obsessive behavior that doesn't want to let go. So let's start with the sunk cost fallacy. If you're unaware, it's basically the idea that because we've already paid our dues, in business, obviously it's money and the blood, sweat, and tears you've poured into it. In shows, it's the time, energy, and the emotional investment you've paid. Because you've already paid those things, you feel that you are compelled to keep paying, even when the product or the result that you initially signed up for isn't what you ended up getting or wanted. Simply because if you stop, you basically admit that, you've wasted your life, you wasted your effort, and that's not really a good thing. It's why it's called a fallacy. It's a flaw in logic and reasoning, and it's exactly what's happened in both cases. In the Snyderverse people thing, camp, whatever, fans just didn't watch Man of Steel in 2013 and BVS in 2016. I'll argue it even stretches way back into the Nolanverse because the Dark Knight trilogy, but I'm not gonna get, again, different video for that. But they spent years defending, DC in this kind of direction, especially against, what was popular at the time and still is today, kind of. And so they kept defending the movie and then Zack Snyder and that kind of direction against this barrage of, criticisms by actual moviegoers. And yeah, as someone who actually liked BVS, the Ultimate Edition more than the theatrical cut, I think it's not bad, it's just fine. It's not also great. Those movies weren't really that good. The DCEU didn't really, to me, didn't really pick up until Aquaman, which made it fun and just leaned into like the absurdity and like the fantasy of it all. And again, not this kind of video. But going back to the Snyder Cut people, they bought into a 5-year plan, or like a 5-film plan, right? And so when that 5th film eventually did come out, the theatrical release of Justice League, and it wasn't just a bad movie, it was like really, really bad. All that time defending, the vision of Lord Snyder and all that stuff, that people were just mad about it. And especially considering like the payoff that didn't pay off, where you were building this, or at least Zack Snyder was building this sort of like version of Superman in Man of Steel, and then he died, and then he was supposed to have this triumphant return, and then it just didn't make sense in Justice League. So people were pissed. So instead of moving on, the investment, shifted into a campaign where they were like, I've already spent 4+ years defending this, I'm not just going to stop now. And this is also set by the president. I'm going to get into this a bit later, but the studio was known to have meddled in this universe up until that point. Like, BVS was cut down, the Suicide Squad wasn't, or Suicide Squad 2016 wasn't what, it was supposed to be. And so there was precedent for, people thinking this way, especially considering the fact that Zack Snyder did step down. Someone was brought in to finish the movie and change the thing completely. And it ended up being like this actual thing that for the longest time people were clowning on them. Which from an outsider point of view, yeah, suppose that's true, because everybody else was moving on. There was this new slate of movies that, people were or the DC film thing at the studios were churning out at the time, and they were all right, and people were moving on. So the release of Snyder Cut movement pretty much ended up being a thorn on people's sides at the time, up until, in 2020 when that year happened, and movies stopped being made, and Warner Brothers looked at it, Warner Brothers looked at what they had and figured, hey, let's just release this thing, because we're not making movies anyways. And that's pretty much the story of how the Snyder Cut did end up getting released. But then the movement turned into the Restore the Snyderverse movement, and it's still not, people aren't letting go. In the Stranger Things side of things, one part of this whole sunk cost fallacy thing is the fact that Stranger Things is essentially this generation's Harry Potter. They grew up with the show, the actors, the characters, and the story. So imagine if for us millennials, at the end of Harry Potter, it actually sucked balls, and not just like the books, but actually the movie. That was pretty much like, in and of itself, would help you understand like why Conformity Gate is the way it is, right? But in the other part of it was that this is a show that's built on mystery and theorizing what the hell is going on with all of the mysteries. For most of the show's existence, the Upside Down was never really explained. Who was the real bad guy? Vecna, or the Mind Flayer. Vecna didn't really come into the picture around season 4, and it had the same amount of theorizing trappings that conspiracy theories of the Snyder Cut camp, which we're going to get into a bit later. The show had the same amount of conspiracy theories trappings, and so that pretty much lays down the foundation of sunk cost fallacy. Time, energy, and emotional investment can't bring you that far. For both of these groups. So what actually draws people in? Well, content. Lots of content. In both cases, there's simply a lot of content for people to become more and more attached. And this is the game. The more content there is, the more touch points, or each point of content is a way to help build your relationship with your audience. So stands to reason that the more content you have, the more you're just going to be able to build stronger and stronger relationships with your audience. In the Snyder Cut movement, it was drawn out over years and years, plus lots of bonus content leading up to Batman v Superman and Justice League, that first phase of DCEU. They did that basically to catch up to the MCU, because the MCU obviously could take their time within each movie to build both the story they're telling, the long multi-movie arc that they're planning out, famously in the MCU, Phase 1, Infinity arc, but also the world building. Each movie is an entry to help build your world, and with the MCU, a lot of people forget this, it really didn't connect at all until, I believe, Captain America, when the movie literally had Tony Stark's dad and the Norse mythology stuff from Thor. So when the Avengers came out, it wasn't like, which really, like, narratively, even the act structure is weird. It was like 5 arcs of just one thing leading to another, and then the whole point of that was just connecting all of these movies into that, Avengers money shot. Wait, where am I going with this? Yeah, so Snyder Cut, they were pretty much doing world building at the time. They produced a lot of these, behind the scenes content and featurettes, and even this unknown or mostly forgotten comic book about Henry Cavill's Superman pretty much saving people as a way to like say sorry because of what happened in Man of Steel. So that was a lot of content in the Snyder Cut camp. In the Stranger Things camp, yeah, it's mainly been just the episodes over the years. Each season is like 8 episodes, so it's like 8 hours or something, 8 to 10 hours, 8 to 9 hours. And to me, it's not just the fact that these episodes exist and there's that baseline, but that's the thing. It's a baseline. I assume for most people they're gonna watch the whole season or like the whole series of Stranger Things just once, one episode each, or like each episode once, at least once, or like roughly once. But there are gonna be people who are gonna be way much more invested in this, where season 1 comes out, they binge the whole thing. Season 2 comes out, they binge season 1 and then season 2. Season 3 comes out, they binge season 1, season 2, and then get into season 3. And so it's sort of like this Stranger Things put itself into the marathonable, TV shows like Breaking Bad and obviously The Lord of the Rings and trilogy and the Star Wars saga, where you can't just really watch one movie, you have to watch all of them. And one of the reasons why Star Wars is the way that it is, even in spite of all the bad shit that's been coming out, objectively bad, by the way, I'm gonna fight you with that. It's the fact that we've mostly watched Star Wars as a trilogy every single time. And it's the same thing with The Lord of the Rings. So rather than just watching one movie every now and then, we watch the whole thing, and that's a lot of content we watch, and it just builds the relationship. It deepens what was already there, and it builds what isn't there. But all of that is nothing if what we're buying into isn't good to begin with. Which brings us to the fact that the conspiracies in both cases, the Snyder Cut movement and the Stranger Things camp, conspiracies are good, man. Like in the Snyder Cut, they don't really have in-universe conspiracy theories because again, it didn't pan out after Batman v Superman, I'll argue. Like it pretty much, the Snyder Cut or the Snyderverse pretty much ended in Batman v Superman. Yes, Zack Snyder's Justice League does exist, but it's also like dead in the water. And the DCEU at the time pretty much branched out and died in the water too. So now it's up to James Gunn to actually revitalize DCEU so we can have, more Batman movies. Not just like Robert Pattinson Batman, like actual fantasy, sci-fi Batman. Anyways, again, different video. But with the Snyder Cut, the conspiracy theories aren't actually in the show's universe. It's in real life. It's the Hollywood behind the scenes drama. Everyone was hyped for the DCEU and Justice League, and even the haters. Haters of the DCEU and haters of the Snyderverse thing. Because a lot of content was being produced and reproduced. Every rumor, was chased. Every casting choice, like inkling of a casting choice, was run down to oblivion because people were that hyped. And again, even the haters. And so if you were a DC fan at the time, half of the content that you consumed about this IP were those things. The rumors, the casting news, fan casting, recasting, plot leaks, etc., etc., etc. And with Stranger Things, it was fairly low stakes. At the beginning, and we're due for an earthquake. Alright, game's pretty much paused, so I'm just going to talk about Stranger Things first because we wreck all of this stuff out. In contrast with the Stranger Things side, the conspiracy theories were pretty much just in-universe. Nothing really happening in real life, although the real G's know about Montauk. Just saying. But the conspiracy theories were low stake, what's happening in the show, especially during the beginning. And it only really ramped up within season 5 because, at the time, because season 5 was released in multiple parts, and you had a lot more of like the relevant puzzle pieces start piecing together what's actually going on. Because the show pretty much followed this format from season 1 to season 4 where you come in, nothing's happening, then some stuff starts to happen, then you start piecing together what could be happening, and then everything wraps up at the end of that season, and then you start again in the same situation in the next season. Season 5 pretty much absorbed all of that weight, and so not only were a lot of these puzzle pieces retained, all of a sudden all of them are now relevant. Which is really also what got a lot of people conspiracy theorizing over how Stranger Things is actually gonna end. And in season 5 we got the Vecna Mind World, and what the Upside Down really was, and the Abyss, and the fact that people had all this free time at the end of the year to just play around with these puzzle pieces. In and of itself, it was the perfect storm. So how does this all work together? Like, how does the sunk cost fallacy thing work with the abundance of content that people consume, with the fact that the conspiracies are actually good? First, earthquake time. And I'm gonna rebuild. Okay, that is pretty much it. Okay, we're gonna rebuild as we go along. Okay, so how do those three work hand in hand? Well, conspiracy theories aren't really that good in and of themselves. Like, for a conspiracy theory to be good and really compelling, there's gotta be a lot of context that has to be set up for the conspiracy theory to build on. And really, like, be irresistibly sexy. So, aliens back in the day, not that big of a deal. Now that we have, a bunch of military people saying officially, hey, we have things that we can't explain. We have videos, right? It hits different compared to like in the 90s when the internet was young and you really don't believe, or actually shouldn't believe, what you see in the internet. And it's the same thing with the type of conspiracy theories we have in the Philippines, where, and I guess in Southeast Asia too, because we have this thing called Yamashita's treasure. Like Yamashita at the end of the World War II, he took all like a bunch of gold from all over Asia, put it in one place, and then buried it. And somewhere within Southeast Asia, supposedly, all of its treasure, right? In and of itself, that's like, okay, cool. But if you're a poor country, and the country isn't really running as well as it's supposed to be, and you realize that there's gold somewhere in your country, people to this day like hope and pray that like that's an actual thing that's going to help save the country because they're that desperate. So every good conspiracy theory needs like a good foundation for it, to build off. And the good foundation that the Conspiracy Gate and the Snyder Cut movement builds off of, again, are the loads of content that people consume and the fact that it doesn't pay off and people are now in the sunk cost fallacy area. With content, the more that there's around, there's simply more touch points or potential it is to build a relationship with your audience, from the show or like the IP with their audience, either from scratch or to help deepen what's already there. If you consume a lot of it, the more you actually end up being invested even more. And it's not just the actual time that you spent watching the shows, which are measured in hours, minutes, or days, years, or the energy, which are measured in calories. What's probably most important here is the emotional investment that stacks up pretty well because A, that's not really quantifiable, and B, it snowballs really, really fast. And obviously, the more content you consume, the more you get invested, the deeper you sink in the sunk cost fallacy thing, the more you're unwilling to let go. And you're basically digging yourself deeper and deeper in a pit, and hence some theming with some of the games I play on these Not Let's Plays. With Fill Up the Hole, we're burying Stranger Things in the Snyderverse with this. So what do I think is going to happen with Stranger Things next? Number one, Stranger Things will not kill their flagship IP. It's one of the first IPs they made that's actually theirs when they were transitioning from, a streaming platform for other people's content into actually making content. And it was a very huge success from the beginning. So they're not gonna let it go. They already made the Vecna stage show. And there's a spin-off series announced, like a live-action spin-off series, and they have the animated show with the original cast. Somehow before all of this, like in the early 80s. That's not going to go away. So we're still going to have Stranger Things stuff in the Stranger Things universe. Probably not going to be but we're probably not going to get that mythical episode 9. So I think the Conspiracy Theory Gate is probably going to die down. I'm saying hopefully, and I'm saying that not as a hater of the show, but really there's really not much anything, and I'm going to explain this in a bit when I explain what I think actually happened in the ending. But in my opinion, it actually cheapens the experience. Again, more on that later, because I think it's good that they left it ambiguous and not everything needs a closure. But also, at the same time, people aren't exactly slowing down. So what's likely actually going to happen is most of the world is going to move on, but then there's also going to be that, those stragglers, those diehard Conformity Gate loyalists who are going to continue to shift the goalposts and sip more of the Kool-Aid because, in the words of the great warrior poet Mitten Squad, God rest his soul, this is where the real game begins. Again, sunk cost fallacy is not actually what drives people insane. It's what keeps people miserable that amplifies whatever insanity and illness, like an actual malady inside of them that already is there. Not calling them mentally ill, but illness, the English definition, illness, the spirit of the original word, being ill, not being well inside. Because even if the Duffer Brothers did end up rounding up the gang and making that episode 9 officially around the general idea of what the fans came up with as, part of Conformity Gate, a certain percentage of that group will never be happy because it will not be 100% of what they wanted it to be. And that's just the thing with every media. So really, this whole Conformity Gate movement has two paths, well, three. Number one, just let it go. Number two is the way of the Asloon, aka r/Batman Arkham, and the Half-Life fans, who's been praying for and making all these sacrifices for the release of Half-Life 3, that I'm certain I'm now part of unofficially. Yeah, I stream Hopium Road. Didn't intend for that plug, anyways. That's option 2, where you're mostly doing it for the funsies because it's like a fun meme for people to play around with, but it's not actually like you don't actually believe or like want that to be a thing. Like, I mean, obviously it would be nice if it was, but also you're realistic. You know how the world works, and you actually have other stuff going on in your life. Or option 3, or option C, whichever I started with, the actual asylum where you need professional help, like how a lot of Snyderverse people still believe that they have a chance in restoring Lord Zack Snyder's vision for the DCEU in 2026, when Zack Snyder moved the fuck on, Warner Brothers moved the fuck on, DC moved the fuck on, all the actors in that thing moved the fuck on, except maybe Harley Quinn and like the people who carried over from like the old part of the DCEU. It's weird. Anyways, it's 2026, and there hasn't been any new stuff since 2021. It's been 10 years since Batman v Superman. Literally everyone else moved on. I can see a similar percentage of the Stranger Things Conformity Gate people being stuck there like 10 years from now. At least that. At least like what we have with the Snyder Cut. Percentage of all the people who like DC and the Snyder movies at the time. So yeah, those are the 3 things I think are likely going to happen. Now if you're curious what I think about what happened at the end of Stranger Things, now's the time. So, what do I personally believe happened at the end of Stranger Things? There's a 2-part answer to that. Okay, the first part that I genuinely do believe is that the ending is a legitimate choose whatever ending you feel like. And not because the show told me so. Like, partly because the show told me so, but also because some movies, some shows, or some stories really need this kind of ending. Obviously, The Odyssey, another Nolan movie that's going to come out. And another thing that I'm going to make a video of, obviously Odysseus has to come back to Ithaca and wrap that story up. It's that kind of story. Some stories, maybe it's vague, maybe it's ambiguous. Maybe that's the best way to wrap that story up, with a question and not a lot of conclusion. And I think what's great about at least what happened with Conformity Gate, like the silver lining, I'm not even going to call it like a silver lining. I think it's more of like a good or like a happy accident, is the fact that the Duffer Brothers gave us 2 endings originally, and we gave it a 3rd, and people are happy with all 3. The people who would have been happy with the Vecna ending, obviously they it's not officially canon, but does it have to be? Does it matter? You're happy right now just accepting the fact that Vecna won. Why should it matter when the ending doesn't officially exist, right? The Snyder Cut people, they're probably churning out AI releases of the Snyder first. Like, they're probably making it in like a mega drive, right? A mega upload thing in like the deep web. They're happy, at least some of them are. And you can still sort of like, these shows and these characters, they can still live on from how, for example, in my mind, Zack Snyder's Justice League in 2021 leaves that version of the Justice League in a different way than the 2017 version did. It branches off, and I can have both. Obviously, the downside is that we're never going to see that cast or like that version of the Justice League ever again, unless they bring back the multiverse thing again. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be that. We get to have 3 different options of endings when originally it was only supposed to be 2. And fuck that, I'll go even further. What if I wanted Walter White to succeed at the end of Breaking Bad? I don't really get that kind of option. Walter White dies. So fuck you. And the second part of this question, like, what do I think really happened with Stranger Things? It's clear. Elle lives. Deal with it. Fight me in the comments. It's the Occam's razor, simplest and most plausible and cohesive explanation for everything. The only flaw in it is the fact that Elle doesn't like have a nosebleed at the very end, which also Vecna, Henry Creel, doesn't actually have like as much nosebleeds towards the end, and we know he leveled up in like, his power level towards like the end of season 5. Obviously he's less of a man and more of like a tree monster thing from the abyss, but the most likely explanation I can give for why Elle doesn't really have a nosebleed is the fact that maybe after defeating Vecna she could level up. I mean, this show, the Conformity Gate people are also like doubling down on like D&D aspect of it, and you know what's in D&D? XP points, leveling up. So yeah, Elle leveled up. She was able to maybe resist a bit more of the kryptonite sound waves that Maduro also had, just a bit topical over there. And yeah, everything seems to make more sense in that version than, well, maybe she died, or maybe Vecna lived and everyone's dead. So yeah, that's going to be it for me for now. I'm going to wrap this game up, and if I'm going to wrap this game up, I'm not sure. I'm probably going to fill up this hole sometime in the future. I'm going to make a post, like a community post for that. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if it made things make more sense, if it made things make less sense, drop the comments, like fight me or whatever. Let's fight. The comments are empty. And if you've enjoyed the video, drop a like, check out my other stuff, give my channel a sub, and again, watch more of my stuff. It's how you tell YouTube to keep showing you stuff from channels. So yeah, that's going to be it. Again, do drop your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know what you think, and until next time, I'm Inigo, signing off for now. Bye.